Greetings, I'm Brian from RC Workboat Haven. Welcome to part 4 of the 1898 supply steamer build. In this video, we're going to finish the horizontals on the main railing. We're going to take a look at how to arrange these 5 supports for the main canopy, which are attached to the lower deck and the upper deck, and how to fix those in place so that all of the main deck components can be removed. We're going to finish off the top railing from stanchion to cap. At the end of the video, we're going to take a look at the traditional colors of the model and experiment a little bit there. We're going to bring it up to the stage that you see here. So we got a lot of work ahead of us. Let's get busy. At the end of part 3, we brought the model up to this state of completion. And now for the 2 strips that I'm going to put on this railing, I'm going to use 3/32 basswood, and I'm going to cut them about 4 millimeters wide. So let's do that next. Now I'm using a piece of 4-inch wide by 3/32 thick basswood. So starting at the edge with my dividers set at 4 millimeters, I make a mark here and I work my way along the board. This way, it's going to be easier for me to pick up exactly where to set my ruler. Now these boards are 24 inches long, and of course you need a straight edge. It's very difficult to hold it down like this because the straight edge will tend to move and then you've messed up your line. So what I use are these 1 inch by 1 inch by 3 inch steel weights that I use for setup and many other things. And I placed them here on the straight edge, and that gives me 5 pounds of weight to hold everything down. Now I line up the straight edge with the 2 holes at the ends of the boards. Make sure you break off a brand new blade because we're going to do 9 of these pieces. So now with my left hand, I press down hard on these weights and make my first cut. At the end, I move my hand here and continue with my cut. So that's the first cut on this strip, and it's absolutely perfect. So let's start again at the other end. Make sure you keep your knife straight, up and down. So that's 2 cuts. Let's do number 3. So now I'm going to take 2 of the strips and lay them on the underside of the railing. I'm going to measure it, and I read about 28 millimeters. I know I'm going to need 3 equal spaces between these strips, and I found a piece of wood right here that measures approximately 9 millimeters. So I have the bottom strip roughly in place here. I'm making sure that up forward I've got it butting against the stem in the correct position. I have a few clamps on it. So further aft, I'm going to cut the strip off on this particular stanchion halfway through, and then I can butt the next piece against that. So I'm going to mark it here with my pencil. So now using clamps and my spacer, I have this strip of wood in the right position all the way along. I'm going to get my super glue, and I'm going to put a drop of glue on each stanchion. And now I'll bring the port side up to the same stage in the build. So now I'm putting on the second piece here, and I'll just show you how I've been doing this. Using the spacer gauge, I'm getting the second piece in the exact center. So what I do is I put this piece of wood in and just turn it right, left, and I notice how much it swivels. And then I go to the next one, and it's really easy once they're clamped in place to get these pieces in the exact center. Now down here, you can see that I want to get a perfect sweep on the shear. And then on this last stanchion, I make sure it's in the right position by pressing down on it slightly. And I'll put and then put a drop of super glue on there. Now, just like the top of the railing in part 3, it's pretty difficult to bend this 3/32 basswood around this radius. So I put my wood here and marked it here, here, and a cutoff point on the other side. And now I'm going to de-stress the wood so it'll go around that radius. So I'm using a pair of pliers and I'm bending the wood until I hear a slight crack. But I don't want to separate the piece. So you got to be careful with it. And you'll get the feel for it when you try it. So now I've taken the stress out of the basswood and I should be able to work it around the stern. I'm going to leave the two ends until last and super glue these two center ones first. Here and here. Next, I'll super glue here and here. And now the piece at the end is pointing down as it should. So I'll press in with my thumb, raise it up, and super glue it right here. And here on the port side, I'll do the same thing. And just as a precaution, I ran a bit of super glue along the area here, and that should reinforce it a little bit. Now I plan to reinforce these strips with CA glue on the underside and on the inside on the stanchions. I want it plenty strong. But overall, I think we've got a nice, even looking railing. Now with RC workboat modeling, your models are likely going to be undergoing changes in the future. So that's why it's so important to have the components of the model removable. So you can take everything apart, change the color, make a door open, things like that. Now it takes a little bit of extra planning to construct the model that way, but it's worth it in the long run. So here's a case in point. Right here, I have to add 5 supports for this overhanging section. Now, if I just fix these supports in place, they'll be attached to the canopy and the lower hatch deck, and that would lock in all of this area here so that it couldn't be removed or unscrewed. So I'm planning ahead to have a staircase run on this angle and come up from the bottom through the top deck. And I'm going to fix that staircase to a semicircle that fits just under the canopy, and these uprights will be glued onto that and reinforced so they're plenty strong. So let me show you this in a little bit more detail. So first I'll take off the pilot house. The roof on the pilot house is screwed in from the top, and I have 3mm bolts that secure it to the upper deck. 4 screws attach the upper deck to the main superstructure, and this section lifts off. So using 2 pieces of 1/16 basswood glued together and clamped, I got this piece in here set up at the right angle. I used kitchen cling wrap to isolate my glue from the rest of the fiberglass, and I'll be cutting out a little bit of this wood for the staircase opening. So now I have the wooden insert here under the canopy in place. There's a plate at the front of the ladder opening that will fit tight against the superstructure here. When these 3 screws are removed, everything that has been attached to this wooden plate will remain on the lower part of the boat, and the top will just lift off. I've drilled 5 2mm holes, and these will be the position for the bottom of each of the posts. I'll be using 1/4 inch square dowels, and I've drilled out the bottom end of the dowel with a 2mm hole and CA glued in a section of bamboo toothpick. Then I nipped off the toothpick at about 1/8 of an inch with a pair of shears. And here's a close-up of those posts with the bamboo insert at the bottom end. So these posts will fit into these holes, and they can be turned and swiveled and moved back and forth, and I'll be able to locate the exact spot to CA glue these posts to the underside of that plate. So the next step is to put everything back in position on top of the model and screw it down. What I'm going to do is use 2 pieces of basswood and use these as a measuring stick. I can slide them like this, shorter or longer, and then clamp it. I have 1 stick at the top and 1 at the bottom, and that's pretty close. So now I think I have my post in the perfect spot right here. I put a clamp and a piece of wood so it won't move in this direction, and I have another clamp with a piece of wood so it won't move in. Put some super glue on the end of the post and a spot of super glue on the bottom. So there it is, post number 1. And here's 3 posts that are all in good alignment. 2 more to go. So now I have the 5 posts installed back here on the canopy, and it's time to start working on the railing on the upper deck. I've clamped a 5-foot flexible tape on the outer edge, and I've got the 30-inch mark lined up with the center. So that will be a center post here. Every 2 inches I've made a pencil mark, and that will be for each post. On this radius, the 2-inch segments didn't work out properly. So I'm going to go a bit smaller, and that will help me bend around the radius. And here on the stern, the spacing worked out like this: 1 3/4, 1 3/4, 1 3/4, 1 1/2, 1 1/2. For the railing stanchions, I'm going to be using slightly under 1/4 inch square dowel. I've cut them all at about 1 1/2 inches. Making these stanchions the same way as the post down below, I drilled it out with a 2mm bit, put in a toothpick and CA glued it into place. The way I drilled them was I used a little V-block. I'd set the small post in like this and hold it with my thumb, and then set it down on the drill press table and just hold it there and just held it like this. So I'm going to be drilling 2mm holes and putting these posts in the hole and then orienting it to the proper alignment. And I plan to drill the hole 1/8 of an inch in from the edge. So I lay this on the side of the deck and let it conform to the slope, and then let it go down and make a mark right here. Now, even though a 2mm drill bit is very small, it still needs to have some kind of a center point. Otherwise, it tends to drift around on the gel coat. So I'm using a sharp end on a compass here, and I'm finding the center, and I'm just making a little bit of a hole here through the gel coat, and this will act as a pilot hole. And now I'm going to sand around the holes to make sure that I've got a good contact for my super glue onto the gel coat. So the work up here turned out pretty solid. It'll be even stronger when I have that ladder fixed right in here. So now it's time to put everything back together and get it all screwed down. First step, I'll put on the pilot house. 2 3mm nuts and bolts. I CA'd this bolt on the pilot house side so that it doesn't turn. So now I just have to deal with nuts. And now we'll screw down the top. And here are those stanchions set in position. Some of the toothpicks had to be trimmed a little bit because recall we have a plate under here. Now the trick is going to be to get them all lined up so that they're in the right orientation. From here to about here, we've got a straight line. I have some 3/4 inch aluminum U-channel, and this seems to be just right, and it's perfectly true. I'm going to start with this stanchion right here because I can line it up with the back end of the pilot house. So I'll do the straight section along the sides first and then deal with the radius last. So now I've CA glued this one side, and I've rigged up just a temporary device here to hold the 2 after pieces in alignment, and I've CA glued them. And up forward I've got my center piece lined up correctly. So now I'll continue along and CA glue all these stanchions in place. So now I have all the stanchions on the upper deck in proper alignment, and I have 4 stanchions at the top of where the stairs comes up. Now I'll be using the same method as I did with the lower railing, and I'll finish off the top. So here's the railing on the top deck. Turned out fairly well. I'll do a close-up on that. On the lower railing, the spacing is about 2.5 inches between stanchions. On the upper railing, it's 2 inches. This just measures slightly over 1.5 inches high, approximately 40 inches in height in real life. This block here is 3 inches high, so at 1/2 inch to the foot, this would be a 6-foot tall man. So that is about right. Now up top, I've got the total height at about 1.5 inches, which is more like 3 feet. And that would be the approximate height compared to a man. I carried that 3-foot height all the way along to after the superstructure and then stepped it down. In this after area here, I'm considering putting a lifeboat, a dinghy, and I wanted it to be a bit lower so that if it were on davits, it would be easier to clear a railing. Put a curve right in here on the handrail. And roughly amidships, where I have the cutout for the stairs coming up from the lower deck, I've done a 3-foot high railing around that. And I used 1/16 thick basswood for the horizontals and the handrail capping. So now I'm going to get out my latex primer sealer, and I'm going to put a coat on all the wood surfaces here, and I'll put a coat on the upper deck and the lower deck, and I'll fix up some of the sanding marks that I've left on the side of the hull. I may change the overall color of the boat a little bit. So here's the steamer with latex primer sealer all over the wood areas and on the decks. I painted the fenders, and when I reached that point, I thought this large black gunnel was a bit too intense, and the model just seems to be a little bit more realistic with a whitewashed appearance. Now, my approach to these workboats is to keep things simple and non-tech if possible. So I'm using a brush and paint. It's very easy to change your mind or to experiment with colors using this method. Now, right here as I look at it, I'm thinking, well, if I want the whole boat to have sort of a whitewashed appearance, then I think that this red might be a bit too bright. So I'm going to change that now to a darker green color and then take a look and see what we've got. So here's the steamer with a dark green bottom. I've added a strip right here in black, and in the old days that could have been a strip of metal. That would be a logical thing to attach onto the gunnel, and then the fenders could rub against that. So there is a bit of black there, but a lot less than before. I've painted the top handrails a tan color, and this is the color that I like to use on spars. And the decks I've painted gray. It's going to be fun to play with the color scheme a little bit in the future because everything comes apart easily. Pieces can be picked up and turned and easily painted. Anything can be screwed or bolted to the superstructure. And overall, I have great access to the interior of the boat. So that brings us to the end of part 4 of the supply steamer build. We got a lot of work done, and it just goes to show you how dramatically the appearance changes with color. So that's going to be fun to play with in the future. Now in part 5, we're going to be working our way up onto the superstructure, making doors, windows, ladders, etc. It's going to be interesting now to add some finer features onto this model and then watch how the appearance changes. So don't miss that one. Thanks for watching.